Sign it. A woman making minimum wage like you does not deserve to be a daughter-in-law in this family. The divorce papers were thrown right in my face by my mother-in-law in the middle of a crowded birthday banquet. Mocking laughter echoed throughout the gold-plated, luxurious mansion. My husband, the man who once promised to protect me for a lifetime, coldly turned his face away as if we had never met. No one stood by my side. No one knew what I had silently sacrificed over the past 3 years to save my in-laws' company from bankruptcy. And even fewer knew that this despised daughter-in-law was the very person holding the secret that could make the entire Sterling family crumble overnight. On the day I signed the divorce papers, my mother-in-law smugly declared that once I left this house, I would have nothing left. But little did she know, the moment I stepped out of those doors, I would simply smile, take out my phone, and make a call to a mysterious figure. With just one sentence from me, all the corporate accounts of my husband's family would be instantly frozen. And from that very second, the cold-blooded revenge of a woman pushed to the brink officially began. The first heavy rain of the season poured down on the city in the late afternoon. Raindrops aggressively battered the glass windows of the Sterling family estate, situated in the heart of Greenwich, Connecticut, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the country. The warm yellow light spilling from the massive 3-story mansion made the front garden glow like a 5-star hotel. Rows of luxury supercars completely filled the expansive driveway. Melodious jazz music drifted from inside, blending with the cheerful chatter of the elite guests attending Eleanor Sterling's 60th birthday party. She was my mother-in-law. I stood before the grand wrought iron gates, holding a homemade birthday cake that was slightly ruined from my walk in the rain. My simple cream-colored dress was partially soaked at the hem, and my long hair was dotted with water. I looked down at my worn-out high heels, the faux leather peeling slightly at the toes, and let out a soft sigh. At that moment, I had less than $15 left in my purse. Just 3 days ago, I had received my paycheck, but I secretly transferred every single cent to my husband so he could pay off a corporate debt that the bank was aggressively pressing him for. No one knew about that, and no one in the Sterling family ever bothered to ask if I was struggling. As soon as I stepped into the grand hall, the frigid air from the central AC hit my face, making me shiver. The space inside was overwhelmingly opulent. A massive crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, sparkling brilliantly. The polished marble floor reflected the shadows of the passing guests. On the long banquet tables, draped in white linen, were extravagantly arranged, expensive dishes. Maine lobster, beluga caviar, vibrant red king crab, and imported Napa Valley wines filled the glass displays. The women at the party were all draped in designer gowns, their wrists glittering with diamonds. The scent of expensive perfumes mixed in the air, making me feel even more out of place. While I was still shrinking back near the entrance, my mother-in-law's piercing voice rang out. "So, you finally decided to show up?" Instantly, all eyes turned toward me. Eleanor sat in the center of the large velvet sofa like a queen, wearing a pearl necklace worth millions around her neck. Her deep red lips curled up in utter contempt. Sitting next to her was my husband, Marcus Sterling, wearing a sharp, custom-tailored black suit. He held a glass of red wine, his eyes skimming over me for a mere few seconds before he coldly looked away. I forced a gentle smile. "Mother, I am sorry. I had to work overtime at the office, so I am late. This is a cake I baked for you myself." I had barely presented the cake box when Eleanor burst into loud laughter. It was a laugh full of mockery. "Baked it yourself?" She turned to her wealthy circle of friends and smirked. "Do you all see that? My daughter-in-law sure knows how to be frugal, bringing a cheap cake to her mother-in-law's birthday." The entire group of women erupted into laughter. One woman, dripping in gold jewelry, fake gasped and covered her mouth. "Oh my God, I thought you would at least order a cake from the Plaza Hotel." Another woman looked me up and down. "I heard she is just a regular office worker. Her salary is probably barely $3,000 a month. Eleanor's son really has terrible luck marrying a wife who is so far below his social class." I stood frozen amidst the laughter. The hand holding the cake box tightened until it shook. After 3 years of marriage, I had gotten used to this kind of humiliation. But today, in front of dozens of people, my heart still ached as if someone was crushing it. I unconsciously looked over at my husband, hoping he would say something to defend me, just one single word. But Marcus only took a sip of his wine and spoke with a chilling indifference. "My mother is not wrong. You should learn how to integrate into my family's lifestyle." Those words felt like a knife plunging straight into my heart. I staggered for a few seconds, my lips turning pale. When we were dating, he once told me he did not care if I was rich or poor. On the day he proposed, he hugged me in the pouring rain and said that no matter what happened in the future, he would never let me suffer any indignity. Yet now, He was the very person pushing me into the deepest pit of humiliation. The jazz music in the grand hall continued to play melodiously, but a ringing started in my ears. I tried to maintain my composure and walked forward to place the cake on the table. Right at that moment, my sister-in-law, Chloe Sterling, intentionally slammed her shoulder hard into mine. The cake fell to the marble floor with a loud splat, white frosting splattering everywhere across the pristine surface. The entire hall went silent for a few seconds before erupting into roaring laughter. Chloe crossed her arms and feigned a grimace. Oh, shoot. My sister-in-law really is clumsy, isn't she? Eleanor immediately slammed her teacup down on the table. You really are a useless thing. You cannot even hold a simple cake properly. I bent down to pick it up, but she suddenly stood up, grabbed a soiled napkin, and threw it directly at my body. Clean it up. Do not stand there and embarrass the Sterling family. I knelt on the freezing floor, silently picking up pieces of the shattered cake amid the mocking laughter surrounding me. No one helped me. No one pitied me. Even my husband stood up and went to clink glasses with a business partner, acting as if he did not see the scene unfold at all. But just as I lowered my head to wipe a smudge of frosting off the floor, a phone unexpectedly vibrated in Marcus's suit pocket. As soon as he answered, his facial expression changed drastically. What did you say? His voice was so tense that the entire hall turned to look. The bank suddenly halted the disbursements? Several major shareholders are pulling their capital simultaneously? Why is this happening? The joyful atmosphere of the party vanished instantly. I looked up. For the first time in 3 years, I saw sheer panic appear on the arrogant faces of the Sterling family. The air in the luxurious grand hall suddenly became suffocatingly heavy. The live violin music playing in the background continued its steady rhythm, but no one had the mind to enjoy it anymore. All the guests fixed their gazes on Marcus as he stood frozen in the middle of the living room. His face grew visibly pale after the phone call. The wine glass in his hand trembled slightly. Multiple banks stopped funding at the same time? His voice was hoarse. The person on the other end of the line seemed to be delivering even worse news, causing his expression to grow uglier by the second. Why did the stock plummet so sharply? Who leaked the news? Apex Capital Partners is also withdrawing their funds? The moment the name Apex Capital was mentioned, Eleanor's eyes widened in horror. She abruptly stood up from the sofa, the pearls on her neck clacking against each other. Marcus, what is going on? Marcus did not answer immediately. He gripped his phone so tightly that the veins on the back of his hand bulged, and sweat began to bead on his forehead, even though the air conditioning was blasting cold air. I remained kneeling on the floor, wiping up the crushed cake, my long hair falling forward to cover half of my face. No one noticed that the corners of my lips had just curled up into a very faint, chilling smile. Over the past 3 years, this was the first time I had seen the Sterling family in such a state of panic, because for 3 years, they had always stood on a pedestal, looking down at me as if I were a cheap, disposable item. Eleanor rushed over and snatched the phone from her son's hand. Hello, this is the mother of the CEO speaking. I do not know what the person on the other side said, but a few seconds later, her face turned paper white. That is impossible. Apex Capital is the Sterling Group's largest strategic partner. If they pull out now, the company will. Before she could finish her sentence, the phone dropped from her hand onto the sofa. Whispers immediately erupted across the grand hall. Several guests began exchanging worried glances. Everyone in the business world understood perfectly well. If the banks halted funding simultaneously and their biggest investment fund abruptly withdrew its capital, it meant the Sterling Group was in massive trouble. They were likely on the verge of collapse. Chloe, who had just been laughing at me a moment ago, also turned pale. Marcus, is it serious? Marcus did not answer. He quickly stepped out onto the balcony to make another call. Through the transparent glass, I watched him continuously yelling at someone, displaying a level of stress I had never seen in him before. The rain outside grew heavier by the minute. Lightning flashed across the pitch-black sky, making the luxurious mansion suddenly feel terrifyingly cold. I quietly stood up and took a towel to wipe my hands clean. Eleanor suddenly spun around and glared at me, as if looking for a punching bag. What are you standing there for? Hurry up and clean this mess. I looked at her calmly. For the first time in 3 years, I did not lower my head. My gaze made her freeze for a few seconds. I am done cleaning. My voice was very soft, but somehow, the entire room fell dead silent. Perhaps it was because I had always endured everything, always bowed my head to accept their insults. But at this moment, I was strangely serene. Eleanor furrowed her brows deeply. What kind of look is that? Before I could answer, Marcus returned from the balcony. His face was dark, his tie pulled crooked from sheer panic. He looked at his mother and lowered his voice. Mom, we need to raise $20 million right now. The entire grand hall burst into an uproar. 20 million? Have they lost liquidity? Mom! Chloe's voice trembled. Eleanor tried to maintain her composure. It is fine, our family still has plenty of real estate. But Marcus clenched his jaw. We will not make it in time. Someone behind the scenes is intentionally blocking all of our capital avenues. I listened in silence, because that person behind the scenes was me. 3 years ago, when the Sterling Group was on the brink of bankruptcy, I secretly used the name of Apex Capital Partners to inject funds and save them. Back then, Marcus dropped to his knees, begging me to help him. He hugged me, promising that he would cherish me for the rest of his life. But once the company recovered, the Sterling family began to openly despise my impoverished background. They had no idea that the person behind Apex Capital was never some mysterious billionaire boss, but rather the daughter-in-law they despised every single day. Right then, a middle-aged man in a gray suit hurriedly entered the mansion. As soon as Marcus saw him, he immediately walked over. Richard, can your bank help us secure a $12 million bridge loan? The man remained silent for a few seconds before shaking his head. I am sorry, Marcus. We just received a directive prohibiting any further business with the Sterling Group. The atmosphere turned ice cold. Eleanor shrieked, Who dares to issue such an order? The man looked around and lowered his voice. Rumor has it is a direct order from the chairman of Apex Capital. I quietly bent down to pick up my purse, then slowly walked toward the front door. Behind me, Eleanor suddenly yelled, Halt! I stopped walking. She looked at me with deep irritation. Your husband's company is in a crisis. And where do you think you are going? I turned my head. The yellow lights of the mansion illuminated my face, which had grown pale after years of endurance. Then, I smiled slightly. It was a smile that sent a shiver down the spine of everyone in the room. I am tired. This play should finally come to an end. After my words, the massive grand hall fell into a terrifying silence. The rain outside continued to batter the giant glass windows relentlessly. The glowing crystal chandeliers reflected the tense faces of every single person in the mansion. The extravagant atmosphere of the birthday party had completely vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sense of panic and suffocation. I turned my body, intending to leave, but Eleanor's voice rang out from behind me, cold as ice. Halt. I said, stop right there. I slowly turned my head back. Eleanor could no longer maintain her usual aristocratic elegance. Her face was pale green with anxiety, but her eyes were still full of venom. She took slow, deliberate steps toward me, her high heels clicking loudly against the marble floor, the sharp sounds piercing the dead silence. Your husband's company is going under, and you still want to run away? I looked at her for a few seconds and gave a faint, cynical laugh. Does the Sterling family's business have anything to do with me anymore? That sentence made everyone freeze. Over the past 3 years, I had never dared to talk back to my mother-in-law, not even a single word. Yet today, I was frighteningly calm. Chloe immediately pointed her finger right at my face. What kind of attitude is that? Do not think that just because my brother is facing a little difficulty, you have the right to act all high and mighty. I did not reply. My eyes swept over every person in the room. The faces that had looked down on me, the contemptuous glares, the mocking laughter during every family dinner. Everything flashed vividly in my mind. I remembered the days I had a fever of 104 degrees but still had to get up and cook for the whole family. I remembered the day I was hospitalized for IV fluids, but my mother-in-law called and forced me to come back to scrub the mansion floors because guests were coming over. I remembered selling the only necklace my biological mother left me to give Marcus cash for his business. And in return, all I received was pure disdain. Right at that moment, Eleanor unexpectedly pulled a red folder from her designer bag and slammed it hard onto the glass table in front of me. Smack. I originally planned to wait until after my birthday to bring this up, but now is as good a time as any. I looked down. The top page clearly displayed the words, Petition for Divorce. The room instantly buzzed with whispers. Several guests looked at each other in shock. Some even secretly pulled out their phones to record videos. Marcus stepped forward, his face entirely devoid of emotion. Lily, sign it. I looked up at him. The eyes of the man who once held me and proclaimed his love years ago now held nothing but coldness and disgust. Why? I asked very softly. He gave a dry laugh. Do you truly not understand? My family and you are not in the same class. A girl from a poor background like you is not fit for the lifestyle of my family. Every word sliced into my heart like a blade. But what hurt the most was how easily he said those words, as if our 3 years of marriage had never even existed. Eleanor crossed her arms, her voice dripping with sarcasm. My son is now the CEO of a major corporation. He needs a wife who can benefit his career, not a woman making minimum wage like you. Since the day he married you, I have lost enough face in high society. A woman standing nearby pretended to sigh in sympathy. It is true, social standing and old money really do matter. Someone else scoffed. Looking at her next to the Sterling family is like comparing dirt to the sky. Murmurs of laughter spread across the room. But this time I no longer felt the pain. Perhaps because my heart had grown completely cold a long time ago. Marcus placed a pen in front of me. Sign it. I will give you a small apartment and a $100,000 settlement. Hearing that, Chloe immediately chimed in. Marcus, why give her so much? A woman like her will never find another decent husband anyway. The group burst into laughter again. I looked down at the divorce papers. My fingers lightly traced the cold surface of the paper. 3 years of my youth ultimately exchanged for these thin, fragile pages. Outside, a sudden flash of lightning ripped across the night sky. The brilliant flash illuminated the faces of everyone in that lavish mansion. Cold, fake, and full of greed. I slowly picked up the pen. Eleanor smirked triumphantly. That is more like it. After the divorce, make sure you disappear from my son's life as far away as possible. I signed my name on the petition. My strokes were decisive, without a hint of hesitation. In that very moment, no one knew that they had just personally pushed away the only person capable of saving the Sterling family from the abyss. Marcus took the papers, a brief look of relief washing over his eyes. But then I suddenly looked up, staring straight into his eyes, the corners of my lips curving slightly. Do you really think that after this divorce, I am the one who will lose everything? Marcus froze for a few seconds. He did not know why, but my calm gaze at that moment made his heart suddenly pound with violent anxiety. The grand hall sank into a heavy atmosphere following my words. Marcus's eyes remained glued to my face, as if trying to see through my facade. Perhaps he himself could not understand why the wife who always endured, who always bowed her head to the Sterling family, had completely changed today. No tears, no begging, no clinging. Instead, she was terrifyingly composed. Eleanor slammed her hand on the table. What are you still standing there for? You signed the papers, now get the hell out of my house. I slowly placed the pen down. All right. My voice was strangely light. I bent down to pick up my old beige handbag resting by the table leg. It was a bag I had used for 3 years, its leather straps slightly frayed. In the past, my mother-in-law had repeatedly criticized it, saying it looked cheap and embarrassed the family. But today, I felt it was far more valuable than all the designer goods in this mansion, because at least it had never betrayed me. I turned and walked away amidst the stares of dozens of people. The clicking of my high heels echoed softly against the freezing marble floor. Behind me, the whispering started again. Finally divorced. A poor girl dreaming of entering high society. She really did not know her place. Chloe even made sure to speak loudly. Make sure you do not come crawling back to beg my brother in the future. Laughter rang out again, but this time I did not look back. The rain outside had grown heavier. The cold wind blew in from the main entrance, making the white curtains flap wildly. I was just approaching the mansion doors when suddenly, the sound of screeching brakes echoed. A sleek, jet-black Mercedes Maybach slowly pulled up right in front of the gates. All the guests instinctively looked outside. Even Marcus frowned. The extremely rare license plate made several people whisper in awe. Whose car is that? You do not see many of those in Connecticut. I think that is the corporate car for Apex Capital. Hearing that name, Marcus's facial expression shifted instantly. The car door slowly opened. A woman in her 40s stepped out. She wore a tailored white pantsuit, her hair pulled back into a neat bun. Her aura of cold, elegant authority caused the entire space to fall silent for a few seconds. As soon as I saw her, my eyes wavered slightly. Eleanor instantly changed her attitude, rushing forward with a sycophantic smile. Oh my goodness, Chief Operating Officer Victoria Vance. Many guests immediately began talking excitedly. Victoria Vance, the most powerful right-hand executive of Apex Capital Partners, the notoriously ruthless woman on Wall Street who had forced several major corporations into bankruptcy within months. No one understood why she was making an appearance here. Eleanor forced a laugh. I did not expect you to attend my birthday party today. But Victoria did not even look at her. She walked straight into the grand hall. The sound of her high heels struck the floor evenly, full of commanding presence. Everyone automatically stepped aside to make way. Marcus rushed forward, looking incredibly stressed. Miss Vance, there must be some misunderstanding regarding Apex withdrawing its funds, right? Victoria remained silent. She continued walking and stopped right in front of me. The entire mansion went dead silent. She and I looked at each other for a few seconds. Then, that powerful executive suddenly bowed her head deeply before me. Her respectful voice echoed clearly across the completely silent hall. "I apologize for being late, Madam Chairman." Boom. The entire room felt like it had exploded. Everyone stood paralyzed in shock. The wine glass in one guest's hand slipped and shattered into pieces on the floor. Eleanor's jaw dropped. Chloe's face turned ashen. As for Marcus, his face stiffened as if all the blood had been drained from his body. He stared at me without blinking. "Chairman." The word tumbled out of his mouth in sheer disbelief. I slowly raised my head. The golden lights reflected in my eyes, which had grown cold after enduring far too much pain. Then, under the horrified gazes of the entire Sterling family, I smiled softly. The first smile of a victor. The vast, luxurious space of the mansion was so quiet that the sound of the rain hitting the porch could be heard perfectly. Everyone was frozen, unable to believe the scene unfolding right before their eyes. Victoria Vance, the powerful woman who made the financial sector tremble, was bowing her head and calling me chairman. Eleanor stumbled and grabbed the back of the sofa, her lips trembling. "No, that is impossible." Chloe also turned pale. She is just a normal office worker." And Marcus stood motionless, as if turned to stone, looking at me with shock, confusion, and fear. Perhaps for the first time in his life, he realized he completely did not know the wife he had lived with for 3 years. Victoria slowly stood up straight, then turned to look at Marcus with icy eyes. "CEO Sterling, did you just demand that our chairman sign divorce papers?" Her voice was not loud, but it was enough to make the entire hall run cold. Marcus swallowed hard. "Miss Vance, there must be a misunderstanding. Lily, He turned to look at me, his eyes filled with absolute panic, but I just stood there calmly. My simple dress, slightly wrinkled from the rain, only made the scene more ironic, because the woman most despised by the Sterling family was the very person holding the key to their survival. Victoria pulled a thick stack of documents from her briefcase and slammed it onto the glass table. "These are all the shareholding records. Apex Capital currently holds 38% of the Sterling Group's shares, and the true owner," she turned to me and bowed slightly, "is Chairman Lily Sterling." Crash! Eleanor felt as if lightning had struck her directly. The teacup in her hand fell to the floor and shattered. 38%. Several guests drew in sharp breaths. Everyone knew what that meant. Not only was I wealthy, but I was the largest single shareholder of the Sterling Group. I even had the power to kick their entire family out of the company. Marcus took a step back, his face completely white. "That is impossible. Lily, you hid this from me." I looked at him. 3 years of love, 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of being treated like garbage. In the end, all that was left was a freezing emptiness. "Did you ever ask?" I gave a cold laugh. "Even when I was hospitalized with a high fever, you were busy drinking with your business partners. Did you ever truly care about who I was?" Marcus was rendered speechless. Memories began flooding his mind. The times I quietly transferred money to him, the contracts that were miraculously signed, the times the company was on the verge of bankruptcy only to receive capital injections at the exact right moment. He always thought he was just lucky. But it turned out the person silently saving him for 3 years was the person he had just personally kicked out of his house. Chloe suddenly screamed, "Impossible. She is definitely scamming us. How could a country bumpkin like her be a chairman?" Victoria glared at her coldly. "Miss Sterling, the Manhattan penthouse the chairman currently resides in alone is worth over $10 million. The watch on her wrist is enough to buy your entire house." Chloe snapped her mouth shut. The grand hall erupted into intense whispers. Many people looked at me with completely different eyes now. Shock, fear, sycophancy. Some even instantly changed their attitudes, flashing me awkward, desperate smiles. But I found it deeply amusing. Human nature really is like that. When you are poor, they trample you without mercy. When you are more powerful than them, they immediately bow their heads. Eleanor suddenly stepped forward and grabbed my hand. Her attitude changed so rapidly it sent a chill down my spine. "Lily, sweetie, you are my daughter-in-law." I was just angry for a moment. I slowly pulled my hand away. "Mother." I let out a dry laugh. "Over the past 3 years, have you ever treated me like a daughter-in-law for a single day?" Eleanor stiffened. I looked her straight in the eyes. "The day I was hospitalized for exhaustion, you said I was faking it. The day I lost my first child because I overworked myself for this family, you said I was useless and could not even give birth." The room went completely silent. Marcus snapped his head up in pure shock. "Lost a child?" I looked at him, my eyes freezing cold. "Yes. But you would not know that. You were busy taking your mistress on a romantic getaway to Aspen, Colorado. Boom. That sentence was like a bomb detonating in the middle of the hall. Marcus's face lost every ounce of color. His voice trembled. Lily. For the first time, this arrogant man began to truly panic, because he realized the thing he lost today was not just a wife. The massive mansion sank into a heavy silence. The rain outside continued to wash over the expansive garden, and lightning flashed, illuminating the pale faces of the Sterling family. Marcus stood paralyzed in the center of the living room, his bloodshot eyes staring at me in sheer disbelief. Lost a child. His voice was hoarse. I did not answer right away. I just quietly looked at the man who used to be my husband. 3 years ago, I loved him with everything I had. The day I found out I was pregnant, I was so happy I stood crying alone in the company restroom. I even secretly bought a tiny pair of blue baby shoes and hid them in my drawer, planning to tell him the news that night. But that exact day, Marcus flew out to Aspen with his young secretary. Someone sent me photos of him wrapping his arm around her waist, laughing happily in the middle of the luxurious Ritz-Carlton. While I ended up alone in the emergency room in the middle of the night due to a threatened miscarriage, I still clearly remembered the cold smell of antiseptic in the hospital that day. It was raining heavily outside, thunder roaring continuously, while I lay on the hospital bed clutching my stomach, crying until I went numb. The doctor said, "I am sorry, we could not save the baby." At that moment, I called Marcus over 30 times, but he never picked up. When he finally called back the next morning, the first thing he said was that he was busy meeting clients and whatever it was could wait. I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my skin. Even until today, that pain had never truly faded. The entire hall was suffocatingly quiet as I spoke slowly. The day I lost my child, you were hugging your mistress in a 5-star resort, and your mother. I turned to Eleanor. Blamed me for not knowing how to keep a pregnancy. Eleanor's face immediately turned ashen. Lily, I let out a cold laugh. You said I was a useless hen that could not lay golden eggs. You said the Sterling family was cursed the day they married me. Every word sliced like a knife, not only leaving the attendees stunned but causing Marcus himself to start shaking. He took a few steps back, his eyes red. Lily, I did not know. I really did not know. I looked at him for a long time, then asked softly, "If I were not the chairman of Apex Capital today, would you feel any regret?" That question made Marcus freeze. No one could answer it, because everyone knew the truth. If I were still just a poor wife living paycheck to paycheck, the Sterling family would have tossed me out onto the street a long time ago. Right then, Marcus's phone suddenly rang again. His hands shook as he answered it. Just a few seconds later, his face turned as white as a ghost. What? Seized? The $40 million investment is completely canceled? The grand hall erupted into chaos. A middle-aged man standing nearby turned pale. Is the Sterling Group actually going bankrupt? Marcus screamed into the phone. That is impossible. That real estate project is our last hope. The person on the other end seemed to say something else. The hand holding the phone began to shake violently. Apex Capital is officially terminating all partnerships? No, you cannot do this. Please, let me speak to the chairman. His voice sounded like he was begging. The entire mansion sank into an atmosphere of absolute despair. Eleanor stumbled and clung to her son's arm. Marcus, what is happening? Marcus slowly lowered his phone, his voice hoarse. It is over. Everything is really over. Our last $40 million in capital is gone. Chloe burst into tears. Marcus, is our company going bankrupt? No one answered. The reality was already too clear. I watched the scene quietly. These people, who used to be so arrogant and look down on everyone, were now panicking like they were falling off a cliff. Victoria stepped up beside me and spoke in a low voice. Chairman, should we proceed with seizing all of the Sterling family's collateral? Hearing that, Eleanor nearly collapsed. No! She suddenly lunged forward and grabbed my hand. This time, there was no trace of arrogance left, only pure terror. Lily, I am begging you. Do not do this. This corporation is your late father-in-law's life's work. I slowly looked at the hands gripping mine so tightly. The very hands that had slapped me on multiple occasions, that had thrown the food I cooked on the floor, that had pointed at my face and called me trash. I gently pried her fingers off me. Mother, from the moment you threw those divorce papers in my face, the Sterling family no longer had anything to do with me. After my words, the mansion sank into a crushing despair unlike anything before. The sky outside was pitch black. Rain poured down mercilessly, and lightning continuously flashed behind the massive glass windows, making the faces in the grand hall flicker terrifyingly between light and dark. Eleanor slumped down onto the sofa. Her elegant makeup was smeared with sweat and tears. She no longer possessed the refined aura of a wealthy matriarch. She was just an aging, panicked woman watching her life's wealth turn to dust. "No, we cannot lose the corporation," she mumbled like she had lost her mind. Chloe was frantically calling everyone she knew for help, but no one was picking up. All the people who used to kiss the ground the Sterling family walked on had completely vanished. As for Marcus, he just stood there staring at me without blinking. His eyes no longer held any arrogance, only fear mixed with agonizing regret. "Lily," he called my name in a hoarse voice. I was wrong. For the first time in 3 years, the man bowed his head to me. I looked at him for a few seconds and let out a dry laugh. "If your company was not going bankrupt today, if I was not the chairman of Apex Capital, would you be saying that?" Marcus's throat tightened, because he himself knew the answer was no. Just then, the screeching of tires suddenly echoed from outside the mansion gates. Everyone instinctively looked out. A red Porsche slammed on its brakes in the driveway. The car door swung open, and a young woman wearing a tight black dress, her hair styled in elegant waves, hurriedly ran into the mansion. She had a sharp, beautiful face and carried an expensive designer handbag. The moment I saw her, my face turned icy. It was Harper, the secretary I had caught with Marcus at the resort in Aspen, the very woman who cost me my first child. As soon as Harper walked in, she ran anxiously straight to Marcus. "Marcus, I heard the company was in trouble, so I came immediately." But just as she reached out to grab his hand, the entire hall fell strangely silent. Everyone was staring at me. Harper suddenly noticed my presence. Her eyes faltered for a second, but she quickly regained her familiar, triumphant expression. "Oh, Lily is still here?" Her voice was sweet, but laced with heavy provocation. In the past, whenever I ran into her at the office, she always made sure to refer to me as the poor wife. I remembered her fake, pitying gaze perfectly. Harper stepped closer to Marcus, intentionally linking her arm through his right in front of me. "Do not worry, Marcus. My father knows a lot of people at the banks. I am sure he can help you." As soon as Eleanor saw Harper, her eyes lit up a complete contrast to how she had treated me for the past 3 years. "Harper, you are here. I knew you were the only one who truly cared about Marcus." Hearing that, I laughed out loud. The laugh was light but made the room feel freezing cold. Harper frowned at me. "What are you laughing at?" I slowly walked closer to her, the warm lights reflecting in my terrifyingly cold eyes. "Do you truly believe that after Apex Capital announced they were cutting all ties, your father would still dare to bail out the Sterling family?" The smile on Harper's lips instantly froze. Right at that moment, her phone rang. Harper furrowed her brow and answered it. "Dad?" I do not know what the person on the other end said, but her face suddenly turned paper white. "What? We are not allowed to help the Sterling family? Because of an order from the chairman of Apex Capital?" The hand holding her phone began to shake. "Dad." But Marcus. Click. The line went dead. Harper stood there, paralyzed. I just watched her calmly. 3 years ago, she was the one who sent me those intimate photos of her and Marcus. She was the one who texted me, "A woman like you cannot hold on to a real man." Yet today, that very man was about to lose everything, and she was the first one looking for the exit. Indeed, adversity is the true test of character. Marcus suddenly stepped in front of me, his eyes bloodshot. "Lily, give me one more chance. Please. I really know I was wrong." The grand hall was dead silent. No one expected the arrogant CEO of the Sterling Group to demean himself and beg his ex-wife in front of everyone. But I just looked at him for a long time before slowly delivering a sentence that froze the entire mansion. "Marcus, when I was on my knees picking up that cake by your feet, did you ever consider giving me a chance?" The atmosphere in the mansion effectively turned to ice. The rain outside continued to pound the vast gardens, water streaming down the glass panes like cold tears. Marcus stood paralyzed, his red eyes staring at me in excruciating pain. And Harper, the woman who had arrogantly linked arms with him in front of me just moments ago, was now genuinely panicking, because she understood that if the Sterling Group collapsed, she would lose everything too. Eleanor's voice trembled. "Lily, do you really want to push this family to a dead end?" I slowly looked at her, the crystal chandeliers illuminating a face that had turned cold from enduring too much damage. "A dead end?" I laughed dryly. "Over the past 3 years, weren't you the one pushing me to a dead end?" Eleanor stiffened. I took a step forward. My voice was not loud, but it silenced the entire room. "The day I had a fever of 104, you still forced me to stay on my knees and scrub the entire staircase because guests were coming. The day I lost my job because I had to take care of this household, you called me a parasite. The day I lost my child, you told me I was a useless woman." With every sentence, Eleanor's face grew a little paler. The guests standing around began looking at her with strange expressions. Not with admiration anymore, but with horror, because no one expected this elegant, aristocratic woman to treat her daughter-in-law like that. Right at that moment, bang, 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 heavy knocking echoed from the massive front doors. Everyone jumped and turned around. A group of men in black suits walked briskly into the grand hall, braving the heavy rain, led by a middle-aged man wearing glasses and holding a thick briefcase. As soon as he saw him, Marcus's face lost all color. Attorney Davis. The lawyer offered a slight bow to me first, before coldly turning to Marcus. CEO Sterling, we represent Manhattan Trust. Currently, the Sterling Group has defaulted on its payments. We are here to issue the official notice of asset seizure. Boom. The grand hall immediately descended into chaos. Asset seizure? Oh my God, is it really happening? Is the Sterling family actually going bankrupt? Whispers erupted everywhere. Eleanor swayed, unable to stand on her own. No, you cannot do this. The lawyer coldly opened his folder. This mansion, 3 plots of land, and all luxury vehicles are currently listed as collateral. Starting tomorrow morning, everything will be padlocked and seized. Chloe shrieked and burst into tears. That is impossible. My new Ferrari just arrived. A bank official behind the lawyer replied flatly. I apologize, Miss Sterling, that vehicle is also subject to repossession. Harper finally began to feel genuine terror. She instantly let go of Marcus's arm. Marcus, you said the company was only facing a minor setback. Marcus clenched his fists so tightly his veins bulged. He looked at me, his eyes reflecting absolute despair. Lily, as long as you save the company, I am willing to do anything. I laughed. A laugh that was sadder than it was vindictive. It is too late. Right then, another official walked in and handed Attorney Davis another document. The lawyer opened it, reviewed it, and spoke slowly. There is one more matter. All personal accounts belonging to the Sterling family have just been frozen. The currently available balance, he paused for a few seconds, is roughly $100. The mansion fell dead silent. Eleanor practically collapsed. That is impossible. I have over $16 million in my account. Victoria finally spoke up in a gentle tone. My apologies, Mrs. Sterling. That sum was essentially leveraged funds from Apex Capital. The chairman has recalled it in full. I stood silently, observing the lavish mansion that had suffocated me for 3 years. The custom $40,000 Italian sofa, the imported crystal chandeliers, the priceless artwork lining the walls. All of it was now just property waiting to be seized. Just then, a middle-aged guest suddenly spoke up. Excuse me, I just remembered I have urgent business. Following that, one by one, people began finding excuses to leave. The business partners who had previously raised their glasses to flatter the Sterling family were now avoiding them like the plague. Within minutes, the crowded hall was almost entirely empty. Wealth truly is a terrifying thing. When you stand at the top, everyone wants to cling to you. But when you fall, you cannot find a single hand to catch you. Marcus watched the people leave, then turned to me, his voice shaking. Lily, I am begging you. For the first time in his life, that arrogant man dropped to his knees right in front of me. Right in the middle of the extravagant hall that had witnessed my humiliation for 3 long years. The moment Marcus knelt, the mansion sank into a deathly silence. The rain hammering against the glass roof sounded like thousands of heavy drums echoing through the dark night. The golden crystal lights were still blindingly bright. But the luxury of the mansion now only made the scene look colder and more pathetic. The most arrogant man in the Sterling family, the man who had said I was not in his social class, was now kneeling at my feet in front of everyone. Lily, his voice was hoarse. I am begging you. Save the company. Eleanor, standing behind him, also broke down sobbing. There was no arrogance left. The woman who had thrown a cake in my face was now trembling so violently she could barely stand. Lily, I was wrong. Please, I am begging you. Chloe also rushed forward in a panic. Sister-in-law, I am sorry. I have always been immature. That is why I was so disrespectful. I stood quietly, looking at those 3 people. 3 people who had treated me like garbage. 3 people who had forced me to scrub floors on my knees, laughed at my meager paycheck, and told me I did not deserve to step foot into the Sterling family. Yet today, all 3 were bowing their heads to me. Life's irony is almost comical. Standing nearby, Harper's face was completely drained of color. She watched Marcus kneeling at my feet, her lips quivering in shock. Perhaps she had never imagined that the man she wanted to steal would lower himself to such an extent for another woman. Right then, Victoria stepped forward and handed me a black folder. Chairman, all the paperwork is ready. I slowly took it. A flicker of hope sparked in Marcus's eyes. Lily, are you agreeing to save the company? I looked down at him and smiled slightly. A terrifyingly cold smile. Yes, but not for free. The room fell instantly silent. I opened the folder, the crisp white pages stark under the lights. This is a transfer agreement. From today onward, your remaining 30% of shares will belong to me. You will be removed from your position as CEO, and all executive power over the Sterling Group. I paused for a second. Will be taken over by me. Boom. Eleanor stood frozen in shock. No, that is the Sterling family's legacy. I glared at her coldly. Legacy? When the company was about to go bankrupt 3 years ago, you people dropped to your knees and begged Apex Capital for investment. Without my money, the Sterling Group would have crumbled long ago. Marcus clenched his fists, his face pale. He understood perfectly well. I was right. Without me, this corporation would not exist today. I placed the agreement on the glass table. If you want to keep the corporation, sign it. If not, the banks will seize everything tomorrow. The tension was suffocating. The ticking of the grandfather clock echoed clearly across the massive hall. Marcus lowered his head, his hands gripping so tight his veins popped. He knew if he signed, he would lose all his power. But if he did not, the Sterling family would face total bankruptcy. Suddenly, Harper lunged forward. Marcus, you cannot hand the company over to her. Are you crazy? She turned and pointed her finger directly at my face. You are just taking revenge, aren't you? I looked at her calmly. Yes, I am taking revenge. So what? Harper choked on her words. The hall went dead silent. No one expected me to admit it so bluntly. I stepped closer to her, my voice soft but razor sharp. Did you know that on the day you sent me photos of you and Marcus hugging at that resort in Aspen, I was lying in a hospital bed? Did you know that the baby in my stomach died that very night? Harper turned pale and took a step back. I did not know. I did not do it on purpose. Not on purpose? I laughed out loud. Then what are you crying for now? You are not the one losing everything. Harper was struck speechless. Because for the first time, she understood what it felt like to be backed into a corner. Marcus slowly picked up the pen, his hand shaking violently. He looked up at me, his eyes red and teary. Lily, if I sign this, can you forgive me? I stayed silent for a few seconds, then answered softly. There are some wounds that a lifetime of apologies can never heal. After my words, the massive space inside the mansion fell into silence once again. The rain outside had dialed down to a drizzle, but the atmosphere in the hall was colder than the early winter storm. Marcus remained kneeling before me, the hand holding the pen trembling sporadically. The once arrogant man now looked as if all the life had been drained out of him. His red eyes stared at the contract on the glass table. If he signed, he lost the corporation. If he did not sign, the Sterling family would face complete annihilation. Finally, Marcus closed his eyes and slowly signed his name. Click. The sound of the pen capping was very faint, but to the Sterling family, it sounded like the collapse of an entire empire. Eleanor nearly slumped down onto the sofa. It is over. The Sterling family is truly finished. Chloe sobbed hysterically. As for Harper, she quietly released her grip on Marcus's arm and stepped back, one step at a time. The way she looked at him held no trace of love anymore, only sheer disappointment. A man with no money had zero value in her eyes. I slowly picked up the signed contract. Victoria immediately bowed her head. Congratulations, Chairman. You currently possess 68% of the Sterling Group's shares. From now on, you are the new chairman. The mansion was completely silent. No one dared utter a word. Because this scene was far too ironic. The daughter-in-law they were kicking out of the house was now the person standing above the entire Sterling family. I looked around the grand hall. This place had been my nightmare for 3 years. That marble staircase was where I knelt and scrubbed all night just for spilling a cup of tea. That long dining table was where I sat and ate in silence amidst biting sarcasm. And the luxurious sofa right in front of me was where my mother-in-law had thrown the divorce papers at my face. All those painful memories finally came to an end today. Right then, Harper suddenly reached out to pull Marcus's arm. Marcus, let us go. Her voice was much quieter, lacking the arrogance she had when she first walked in. Go? Marcus looked up at her, his eyes filled with exhaustion. Harper bit her lip. Why are you still staying here? You lost the company. But before she could finish her sentence, smack. Marcus suddenly shoved her arm away violently. Shut up. Everyone in the hall jumped. It was the first time he had blown up at Harper in front of people. Marcus's eyes were bloodshot. If it were not for you, Lily would not have left me. Harper stood frozen. Me? You were the one who came on to me. Have you forgotten? Boom. The air instantly froze. Harper burst into tears. When Lily was just your poor wife, you criticized her for being tacky and not knowing how to dress. You said being around her made you lose face in high society. Now that she is rich, you turn around and blame me? Every word she said landed like a series of slaps across Marcus's face. He stood there, speechless, unable to argue, because everything she said was the absolute truth. I quietly watched the scene unfold. My heart no longer hurt. There was only a hollow emptiness. Perhaps when a person has been hurt for too long, they lose the capacity to even feel hatred. Just then, Attorney Davis stepped up and respectfully asked me, "Chairman, how would you like to handle this estate?" I looked around the massive house and answered slowly, "Sell it. Use all the proceeds to pay off the company employees first." The entire room froze. Victoria looked slightly surprised. "Chairman, that amount is close to $20 million. I nodded. "I know. I do not want innocent employees to suffer because of the mistakes made by the executive board." Marcus snapped his head up to look at me, his eyes shaking violently. Perhaps it was only in this exact moment that he truly realized what a profoundly good woman he had lost. Eleanor sobbed heavily. "Lily, I really was wrong. If I could do it all over again, I would definitely treat you well." I gave a sad, faint smile. Unfortunately, there are no what-ifs in this world. I turned and walked toward the mansion doors. Outside, the rain had stopped at some point. The sky, clearing after the storm, began to reveal the first rays of morning light. A gentle breeze blew past, making my hair flutter slightly. Behind me was the crying, the regret, and the complete ruin of the Sterling family. But ahead of me was a brand new life that I had finally reclaimed for myself. 3 days after that rainy night, the news of the Sterling Group changing hands spread across the entire New York financial sector. Every financial outlet ran the same shocking headline: "Mysterious chairman of Apex Capital Partners officially takes over the Sterling Group." No one expected the woman behind the city's most powerful investment fund to be the very daughter-in-law the Sterling family had looked down on for years. That morning, the sky was a rare, brilliant blue after days of heavy rain. Sunlight poured over the upscale Greenwich neighborhood, making everything shine brightly. But inside the Sterling estate, things were terrifyingly grim. Red foreclosure notices were slapped across the garage doors. Rows of luxury cars were being towed away by the bank's repossession agents. The roaring engines echoing through the quiet neighborhood sounded chilling. Eleanor collapsed on the sofa. Her hair, once perfectly dyed black, was a messy bird's nest. She wore wrinkled silk pajamas, her face gaunt as if she had aged 10 years in just a few days. "Do not take that Bentley. That is my car." But no one was listening to her anymore. A bank official and coldly signed the handover paperwork. "I apologize, Mrs. Sterling, but all assets are currently subject to seizure." Chloe sat crying hysterically in a corner. She was clutching several Birkin bags tightly as if afraid someone would snatch them away. "Do not take them. These are mine." But the inventory agent just replied flatly, "I am sorry, miss. Any assets purchased using corporate accounts must be confiscated, including that $2 million worth of jewelry." Chloe nearly went insane. "No!" Meanwhile, Marcus stood silently on the balcony, smoking a cigarette. In just a few short days, the man who was once the most famous young CEO in finance looked so haggard he was barely recognizable. Stubble covered his face, his eyes were sunken, and his entire posture radiated exhaustion and despair. Since the day he lost control of the company, not a single person had called him. The business partners who used to flatter him had all turned their backs, and even Harper had vanished that very night. Marcus remembered clearly when she left. Harper had coldly told him, "I cannot stay with a man who has nothing." That sentence sounded exactly like what he had once told me years ago. Karma truly came fast. Right at that moment, screech. The mansion doors opened. Everyone turned around at once. I walked in. Today I wore a simple but elegant white pantsuit, my hair styled in a neat bun, giving off an aura completely different from the submissive daughter-in-law I used to be. Behind me were Victoria and a team of lawyers. The entire mansion went instantly silent. As soon as Eleanor saw me, she leaped up and ran over, her eyes filled with hope. "I knew you still cared about us, right? I am begging you, let our family stay here." Her voice choked up, sounding genuinely pathetic. But I just calmly surveyed the massive mansion, the place that once held all my painful memories. I still remembered the winter of last year. I was so sick with a fever that I passed out in the kitchen, but I was still forced to wake up and cook for their guests. In this very house, I had stood crying all night on the balcony when I found out my husband was cheating on me. And this was the very place where I lost my first child. I looked at Eleanor slowly. "Mrs. Sterling." That title made her freeze. I had never called her that before. "At 10 o'clock this morning, the title to this estate officially transfers. You have 30 minutes to leave." Boom, Chloe shrieked in tears. "Are you crazy? This is our house." I glared at her coldly. "No. From today onward, it is my house. The room plunged into absolute silence. Marcus finally turned around slowly to look at me. His eyes were filled with agonizing pain. Lily, do you really hate me that much? I looked at the man who was once my youth and answered softly, I do not hate you anymore, because you are no longer worth holding on to. That sentence made Marcus turn pale. Perhaps that was the most painful punishment of all. Not losing money, not losing power, but realizing that the person who once loved you with their entire being now had absolutely zero feelings left for you. 11 o'clock in the morning. The massive iron gates of the estate slowly closed behind the Sterling family. The sky that day was unusually blue. Sunlight stretching across the stone driveway still wet from the previous night's rain, but the scene in front of the mansion was indescribably tragic. Eleanor stood dazed next to a pile of luggage. The luxurious silk shirt she had been so proud of was wrinkled, and her graying hair was clearly visible under the sunlight. Chloe sat right on the ground, crying until her voice went hoarse because her jewelry and designer bags had been wiped clean by the bank. As for Marcus, he stood silently in the back, holding only a small black suitcase. The man who once had everything was leaving his own mansion with absolutely nothing. A few wealthy neighbors passing by stole glances and whispered amongst themselves. The Sterling family used to be incredibly arrogant, which made their current state all the more pathetic. Hearing the whispers, Eleanor lowered her head. Perhaps this was the first time in her life she felt what it was like to be looked down upon by others. Right at that moment, a black Rolls-Royce slowly pulled up in front of the estate. The driver immediately got out and opened the door. I stepped out of the car. My elegant white suit fluttered slightly in the breeze, and the sunlight reflecting off my calm face left everyone around in stunned silence. As soon as Eleanor saw me, she lunged forward. She dropped to her knees right in front of me. Lily, please, give me a way to survive. That image left the onlookers paralyzed. The proudest woman in the entire neighborhood was now kneeling at the feet of the daughter-in-law she had once despised. I looked down at her. In my heart, there was no sense of vindication, only exhaustion. 3 years of enduring, 3 years of being hurt, 3 years of having my self-respect trampled on all of it had culminated in this exact moment. Yet strangely, now that I had actually won, I did not feel happy. Perhaps because the things I had lost could never be gotten back. My first child, the love I once had for Marcus, the trust I once placed in this family, they were all dead a long time ago. I gently helped Eleanor stand up. That action made her burst into heavy sobs. Are you still willing to forgive me? I stayed silent for a few seconds, then shook my head slightly. No, I just do not want to become a person like you all used to be. Eleanor froze. I looked over at Marcus. He was still standing there, staring at me unblinking, his red eyes full of pain. In just a few short days, the man had completely transformed. He no longer possessed the arrogance of a young CEO. He was just a defeated man burdened with endless regret. Lily. He called my name in a hoarse voice. From the beginning until the end, did you ever truly love me? I gave a very faint, sad smile. If I did not love you, I would not have been stupid enough to endure everything for 3 years. Marcus lowered his head, his shoulders shaking. It was the first time I ever saw him cry. I am sorry. I am so sorry for losing you. I looked at the man who had been my entire youth for a long time, then spoke slowly. Marcus, people usually only know how to appreciate things after they have already lost them. A gentle breeze blew past, making the yellow leaves in the yard flutter down to the stone pavement. I opened my handbag, took out a key, and handed it to Marcus. He was stunned. I bought a small house. It is not big, but it is enough for 3 people to live in. The Sterling family was left speechless. Eleanor sobbed, her voice breaking. Lily, why are you still helping us? I looked up at the clear blue sky in the distance, my voice as light as the wind, because I once genuinely considered you all to be my family. It is just a shame that you never considered me to be yours. After saying that, I turned around and got into the car, without looking back. Behind me was the sound of the Sterling family's heavy sobbing, but ahead of me was the beautiful sunshine of a brand new life. A life where I finally learned how to love myself. 3 months later, the city entered the chilly final days of the year. That morning, the soft sunlight pierced through the massive glass windows of the highest floor of the Sterling Group. No, it should be called the Apex Group now. I stood in front of the expansive window, watching the busy traffic below. The city was as bustling as ever in Manhattan, only my life was completely different. Over the past 3 months, I had restructured almost the entire corporation. Corrupt managers were fired, employee salaries were paid in full, and stalled projects were restarted. The corporation had steadily stabilized from the brink of bankruptcy. What surprised me the most was that the employees loved me more than I expected. They did not call me the cold chairman. They called me the person who saved the company from collapse. Victoria walked into the office, smiling as she placed a cup of coffee on my desk. Chairman, you have a meeting with our French partners at 9. I gave a slight nod, then suddenly asked, how is the Sterling family doing these days? Victoria stayed silent for a few seconds. Eleanor's health has not been great. Chloe has been selling things on live streams to pay off debts. As for Marcus, she hesitated. It seems he still has not left the city. I gently tightened my grip around the warm coffee mug. It had been 3 months since the day I left that estate, and I had not seen him once. I thought I had completely forgotten him. But it turns out, there are some people who, even after they walk out of your life, leave a very deep void behind. Right then, a knock sounded on the door. My secretary walked in. Chairman, there is someone here who wishes to see you. I furrowed my brow slightly. Who? The secretary hesitated for a few seconds. It is Marcus Sterling. The air in the room fell quiet. Victoria looked at me, waiting for my decision. I stayed silent for a moment before answering softly. Invite him in. The door slowly opened. Marcus walked in. The moment I saw him, I almost did not recognize him anymore. The man who used to look so elegant in expensive tailored suits had lost a lot of weight. He wore a simple button-down shirt that looked slightly worn. His face was gaunt, and his eyes lacked their former sharpness. But what broke my heart the most was that the way he looked at me was exactly the same as in the past, except now, his eyes were full of regret. Lily, his voice was hoarse. I gave a slight nod. Have a seat. He stood still for a few seconds before slowly sitting down on the sofa opposite me. The space between us was suffocatingly quiet. Outside the glass window, the sun was still casting a golden glow over the city. But between us, it felt like there was an entire lifetime that could never be reclaimed. Finally, Marcus took a small box out of his coat pocket and placed it on the table. I froze when I saw it. It was a tiny pair of blue baby shoes. The shoes I had hidden in my drawer years ago after finding out I was pregnant. The day I lost my baby, I thought they had been thrown away. Marcus kept his head down. I found them in the old storage unit. Ever since I learned the truth, I have not been able to sleep a single night. His voice trembled. Lily, I am not asking for your forgiveness. I just want to say that for the rest of my life, my biggest regret is losing you. I sat perfectly still, looking at the tiny shoes on the table, an old pain slowly surfacing again. There are some memories that, no matter how hard you try to forget, can never be completely erased. The corners of my eyes stung slightly, but then I slowly pushed the box back toward him. Keep them. Marcus looked up at me. I gave a very faint, gentle smile. I have no hatred left, and no love left either. Let the past stay in the past. A tear finally escaped Marcus's eye and fell. The most arrogant man was now crying like a child. I stood up and walked over to the large glass window. The sunlight covered the entire room, making it radiantly warm, just like my new life now. Behind me, Marcus spoke in a choked voice. If there is a next life, I promise I will love you properly. I closed my eyes for a few seconds, then replied softly, I hope in the next life we never meet again. A gentle breeze blew past. Outside, the city continued to move, and I had finally, truly stepped out of the most painful days of my life. Because sometimes, the most beautiful revenge is not making others suffer, but living far happier than they ever thought you could. Through this story, we see that in marriage, the most important thing is not money or status, but mutual respect and sincerity. When in love, people can make many beautiful promises, but it is only when hardship strikes that you know who will truly stay by your side. Never look down on someone just because they have less money. Life always has a way of turning the tables when you least expect it. And sometimes, the most painful thing is not losing money or power, but losing someone who once loved you with all their heart. If you found today's story meaningful and touching, do not forget to subscribe to the channel.